letters, which are all about lobbying. I have a couple of other handouts from FCNL up here. One of them is a very interesting one about preventing war. FCNL is very much involved in preventing violence and war, both genocide and the civil wars that are going on all over the world at this point. And one of the things that they're very involved in is getting more money for that, more funds for that from the federal government through the State Department and through a variety of ways in which the State Department is ramping up that the violence prevention end of things. And so there's a handout about that, and there's also a handout about the federal budget, the budget pie, and I think you may have seen that before. So please come up afterwards and grab those handouts. I don't want to take them back with me. I want to talk to you about this story of the budget pie. This is about a fellow named Tom Ewell. He lives on Whidbey Island off of Seattle, Washington, and he moved there about 6 years ago with his wife. He's retired, and he's been working with FCNL for quite a while. And of course, when he moved, he got a new congressman. And that's his congressman in the rocking chair there, sitting with a pie, okay? And that's his house. For about 4 years, he built a relationship with his congressman. He went to meetings, like that fellow back there said. He went to meetings and introduced himself to the congressman. He got up and spoke in public meetings. He went to fundraisings, and not the kind where you had to pay $250 to get in, but the kind where, it was kind of open and he put in $10 in his name. He visited with staff of the congressman, both locally and also in Washington. And finally, the congressman began to recognize who he was. The people in the office recognized who he was. And he got a group together and said, well, let's invite the congressman to my house. And the congressman agreed to come and talk to this group, a peace group, a local little peace group in Washington State on Whidbey Island. And so when the congressman arrived, he found that there was pie on the table. And the pie was divided into the segments of the budget, of the federal budget. And everybody picked out of a hat their section of the pie. And luckily the congressman didn't get the military budget. He got something much smaller than that. So he wasn't quite as embarrassed as he might have been if he had gotten the largest piece of apple pie. But it's been a very good, growing relationship between that group and that congressman. And he is not a liberal congressman. He's more liberal than the guys we have here in Texas, but he's not that liberal a congressman. But they've been able to build some real relationship with him in which he's really come out and voted against some of the federal appropriations for military, for weapons in the past. So it took a while. Of course, this is a guy who has to run, and who knows who will be the congressman in the next election from that district. But did you have a question?
No, but sometimes a little humor can help more than hurt.
That's right. That's exactly right. Yeah. Yes, it does. A little bit of humor really is important in all of this, and they really did get him in this situation. They got his attention in this situation. But I think mostly they're building a relationship, and he's finding out where he can depend on them, because in fact they are, talking to other people about the fact that he's willing to do things that are good things, human services things in particular in this case. They're able to relate to him on that better than they're able to relate to him on the anti-war stuff. But they've been able to get him to support legislation that they feel strongly about, and also environmental legislation. So I just want to tell that story. I also want to tell you just a little bit more about Friends of Peace on National Legislation. The Quakers are a religious group, the Society of Friends. We're very small, we're worldwide. There's a lot of different kinds of us. We worship in different ways. I happen to belong to the silent meeting kind who don't have any pastors, but FCNL has all the kinds involved. It was established in 1943 during the Second World War. They did a lot of really good work with sending surplus grain after the war over to, they had a lot to do with the feeding people in Europe after the war. They've always had a lot to do with civil rights legislation. They're the first religious lobby on Capitol Hill. The first of the religious lobbies. Now, almost all of the denominations have a lobby. They're a lobby in the public interest. We seek a world free of war and the threat of war. We seek a society with equity and justice for all. We seek a community in which every person's potential may be fulfilled, and we seek an earth restored. The earth restored is something that that FCNL concentrates on a lot these days, but just 10 years ago, they didn't see the relationship between that and war as well as they finally did. And now, of course, we all recognize that the relationship between militarism and what's happening to our earth, and the need also for us to address our energy issues and look for sustainability. One of the things that FCNL is, that building that you see in the middle there, FCNL is a building. The original building is, which is on the left-hand side there, from facing it, is a Civil War building, built in the Civil War. And it's right across from the Hart office building. And so when they went to renovate, they couldn't change the facade of the front of the building, the old part of the building. But they started to look into renovation. It's the first LEED certified building on Capitol Hill. They have geothermal heating and cooling and a lot of different environmental they address the environmental issues, and they have a garden on the roof. It's really great.
What is the relationship between the FCNL and the American Friends Service Committee?
They cooperate together. They're not the same group. The American Friends Service Committee is an older group. It's much more involved it's involved in stuff abroad, which FCNL does policy, but it comes out of it. They cooperate all the time. I was employed by AFSC, and I was employed by FCNL at various times. FCNL is much smaller than AFSC. AFSC is got regional offices all over the United States and a lot of offices abroad. FCNL is strictly a group that works on lobbying, and AFSC's charter is much broader. But there's there's a lot of crossover between the people.
Do either of those groups have active or ongoing relationships with the Unitarian Universalist Service Committee?
Most of the work that FCNL does is in coalition. There are only 20 employees at FCNL, and almost half of those are young people who are interns. Terrific intern program. If you know somebody who wants to go into public policy, their internships are open to anybody. And mostly they're young. They're maybe out of college a few years, but a lot of them are just coming out of college. And they've studied something. Sometimes they've studied something that relates, and sometimes they haven't. We have a new set of interns. We hear from them on the board, which is a group of about 200 people. Quakers from all over the country gets together in November, and one session is hearing from the 8 or 9 young people who are interns, and they all do. They don't call them interns anymore. They call them program assistants because they all do real work. I mean, they have to, because that's the only way we can exist. They make up a lot of the staff, but they tell their stories and how they get there. And it's a wonderful, inspiring thing to see these young people who are really at the beginning of dedicating their lives to this kind of work and learning about it. And most of them have done incredible things already, made videos about China, villages in China, and all kinds of things. It's always really exciting. So the other pictures are Raymond Wilson, the first director, and Hubert Humphrey, if you remember him. And our present director is Diane Randall, and she's giving an award to somebody from the State Department there. Another staff member, David Culp, is standing there. These are people who are approachable by phone, by email. If you took a newsletter, you have all of the emails that you need. Please don't hesitate to contact them for information about policy, for connections with legislators. They're really willing to do that. And if you go to Washington, go to FCNL and visit the building, because it's a fascinating building, for one thing, because it's such an environmentally responsible place. But also, it's also interesting to see what they're doing. And if you're going to Washington, make an appointment with these folks, because you don't want to miss a chance to try and influence them. They are right across from the Harding office building on 2nd Avenue and C, and real near the Folgers Library and the Smithsonian. So there's a lot to do in Washington if you get there. These are FCNL's present issues. The way that the issues that they work on get decided are what is being worked on in Congress. You have to have a bill to work on it. But also the Quakers, that when we get together, the 200 of us, every other year, just after the Congress has been elected, we set the priorities that the staff should be working on and that we all should be working on together. They need our help in order to get the work done. And so there's a map, and that's my little thing about FCNL. If you want to talk to me about Texas Impact, I think it's also a terrific group. That they were responsible for getting legislation against payday lending passed in our Texas legislature this year. And, I can't imagine anything more responsible than preventing those people from loaning money at tremendous rates to poor people who can't make it if they don't do that, and then they end up owing more than they make a week. It's just really terrible stuff. So regulation on that is really important, and our legislature did do a good job of that. Now it needs the implementation. Questions? I hope this has been useful to you guys. Yeah. If we had more time, I'd say get together and plan. Does anybody have would anybody like to organize a group to go visit Flores or Corning or? Yeah. Have you made any plans?
Well, I'll just comment on that. Maybe you can make a suggestion. We have communicated with Flores office by we've communicated with Flores office by email, and requested a meeting with him, and we got emails back, kind of indicating there would be a time in the future, but it's never happened, and it's been 2 years now? I guess about 2 years or so. So I don't know what the key might be to meeting. I mean, I guess we tried to start at the top to meet directly with him, because we were able fairly easily to meet with Chet Edwards. But of course, Flores is a different animal, no doubt about that. But I did have a question for you about the photograph. If I can maybe just give you that question too. It's a great idea, and I can see it as a good PR, it's a good way to get the peace message out. But our experience has been with photographs, at least with the local newspaper, is it has to come from their photographer. that you can't just give them a picture, and they're probably afraid it's photoshopped or something like that. Now, maybe you have a different experience you can describe, but that's been what we found, that they wouldn't take those kind of photographs.
You may indeed need to go through, it depends on the paper, and I will answer that directly. You can ask the office whether they would submit it to the paper. They're taking a digital picture. They can send it fairly easily to the paper, if that's what it's going to take. If you tell them, they take the picture. Yeah. They'll take the picture and then send it on. So, okay, yeah. About meeting with Flores, I think you really need to decide, for instance, on this Pentagon spending bill, on the budget issue, this is a perfect thing for a peace group to be visiting on. And you can talk about what's going on locally in terms of human services that aren't being funded because the military is being funded. You can find a lot of information out about this, and you have a right to meet with somebody. They will, I cannot imagine if you call the local office that they won't set up some sort of appointment for you to meet. But you need to know who's going to meet, and you need to decide what you're going to ask, so that you can be specific about it. And try to get the person who best relates to the military's budget issues or the military, or military spending in some way. And I'll be happy to help you if that's the case. I mean, I would be really anxious to see in Waco go meet with this man, because he needs to know you're out there. He needs to know that there are people in Waco who feel like this, and you didn't vote for him, but you did elect him. I mean, he's your representative. He represents you too. So I guess see Alan here, if you'd be willing to be part of that coalition of the unexpected.
Hopefully he does know since we've communicated in writing, with him several times.
Well,
we got through to him. But
the other thing is there may be some young staff member there who's just wishing that there was somebody who agreed with them, even though they're working for him. You might not have any effect on Bill Flores, but you might have a real effect on somebody in his office. And you'll have an effect on the people who go and do it, because the next time that you want to get a group together, those same people will have done it once, won't be quite as scared about it. It's a scary thing to do. I was extremely lucky. The first time I did this, I was working for the American Friends Service Committee in Vermont, and I had a small group of mostly women, a pastor and 3 women who were my support committee, the committee who sort of did the advisory part of my program. And it was during the Vietnam War, and they took me, the pastor didn't come, but the other guys did. They took me down to visit Senator Aiken, and I don't think there are many people in this room who would remember Senator Aiken. He retired about a year after I visited him, and he was a very elderly senator from Vermont. And Vermont's a small state. It's really a small state. And there are more cows than there are people. And so I wasn't surprised that we were able to get an appointment with him. But what did surprise me is as these 3 women walked into the room, he addressed each one of them by name and discussed with them the last letter that they'd written to him. And they had a real relationship with Senator Aiken, and they were setting me up as a young woman, I was in my 20s at that point, to have that kind of relationship. Now, the world has changed since then, but the fact is that Aiken was not a progressive person. I mean, Vermont was not what it is now. He was a Republican, and he was very much of an Eisenhower Republican. And so it wasn't like he was, Bernie Sanders, who we it's pretty easy to visit with Bernie Sanders, and to relate to him. But they had a real relationship with him, and he had a real relationship with them, and he knew that they were going to speak well of him if he did what they wanted him to, and he got elected over and over again from Vermont for years because of it. But you might have a good experience. You just never know. I mean, even with somebody like Flores. So don't take no for an answer about meeting with him. Anybody else have anything that they'd like to talk about? It's great being with you people. I just think it's wonderful to see such a large group of peace people in Waco. I want to take a Thank you for having me.